Yeah, as I mentioned, Donald Trump had an easy victory yesterday in New Hampshire. Nikki Haley trailing by about 10 or so points behind him in that contest. And that's where she invested her entire campaign. That was the big one. That was where she was hoping to get a victory. She did not. For more on this, I want to bring in Congresswoman Kat Cammack. She represents Florida's 3rd Congressional District, and she joins us now. Congresswoman, good to talk to you.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing so good. What was your impression of last night's results? What do they mean?
Well, I was in New Hampshire, and let me tell you, first and foremost, it was cold.
I bet.
Being a Floridian, we're not used to that. But it was an electric night for President Trump. And, it's just one more sign that we need to be putting our emphasis, putting our attention, our focus on the general election. When 7 out of 10 voters are undeclared and they're voting for Nikki Haley, that's a big sign that the Republican base, they're with President Trump. And so I think it's time to read the tea leaves and move ahead with President Trump as our nominee. But that being said, I also think that's a message to us, members of the Republican House and those that want to see President Trump reelected. We've got a lot of work to do in bringing moderates and independents into the fold. That's a group that we're going to need in order to win in November. So lots of great success last night, and a sign of things that we've got to address as well.
Do you get the impression that there are segments of the party that are still hoping that Donald Trump does not win this nomination and that the Republican Party looks different in the future?
I talk to some of those people. They'll be very vocal, but by and large, it's not so much, I think, that they differ on a principle or a value or, a policy position. I think that they just are getting the personality fights. They're taking them very personal, and they need to be bigger than that. They need to recognize that this is so much more than just one man. This is just so much bigger than their personal, feelings. And that's the thing that's really frustrating is you don't have to, love somebody to support them. You don't have to, agree with every little thing that they say. But, man, this is our country we're talking about. And if you're not willing to put aside your petty issues for the country, shame on you. So, I really personally don't care what they think.
Sure.
They need to put it aside, and they need to really focus on what's best for the country.
But you're obviously a Republican. You ran for office. You got elected. Would you be embarrassed if your biggest donor was a Democrat who was dedicated to destroying Donald Trump? That he made it his life mission. That's what Reid Hoffman did, the co-founder of LinkedIn. Then he gave a massive donation to Nikki Haley. And would you be embarrassed if the base of your support wasn't Republicans at all, but instead Democrats who declared themselves undeclared ahead of the vote yesterday just to support meddling in the election?
I could say personally that's never happened to me. My biggest supporters are some of the most conservative, patriotic people I've ever met in my life. So I can't speak from experience, but
right.
It is telling. It is very telling about where your base of support is, if that's, what you're attracting and what you're drawing in. So I'm very concerned that this gets drawn out for a period of time where all of the resources don't coalesce behind President Trump. And that's what really needs to happen. I know for a fact that we cannot survive another 4 years of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. We just cannot. And so we will do absolutely everything possible in order to make sure that people recognize that this is not about one man. This is about our country and the future of our country.
Yeah, it seems like, though, the donor class is very unhappy that Donald Trump continues to advance here. It maybe expressed in part in the Wall Street Journal editorial today, where they insist that Nikki Haley does have some sort of path forward and, in fact, may benefit from Trump being convicted. If that happens, then maybe Nikki Haley should become the nominee. There's a lot of very sinister planning going on right now around an issue, which is that Biden is weaponizing the United States Department of Justice against his political opponent, Congresswoman.
Oh, my gosh. I mean, tell me this is not banana republic type stuff when you have the man in the White House who is prohibiting and actively working to keep his top political opponent off of a ballot. That should send shivers up and down everyone's spine, because that is not the United States of America that we all know and love. When you have an FBI that is going after parents sending agents to take down license plate numbers of parents who go to PTA meetings, when you've got a DOJ that is working hand in glove to cover up the president's son and all of his mistakes and all of his issues, whether it's tax evasion, whether it is lying on background check forms to purchase weapons, whatever it is. We've seen clear as day the weaponization of this government for a political gain under the Biden administration. No one can dispute that. And so every attempt that they make in order to keep Donald Trump from securing the nomination and being on the ballot in the general election is just another step that the American people see as a further weaponized banana republic, and they see it for what it is. It is a witch hunt. They recognize that it is all BS, and they get more and more angry every time that this action is taken. It's actually galvanizing our base. And so if they were smart, they would stop. But they want to keep on going. They think that that's going to impact the election. I think it's going to put more people in a position to get out and support Donald Trump.
Right. In other words, if they do prevail in getting a conviction in with a loaded jury in a city that sides against, like D.C., which always sides against Trump no matter what, it doesn't really matter what the facts are, is it your impression that that'll only galvanize more support for Trump?
Yeah, 100%. I can't tell you how many people that I have talked to who say, I was never really a big Trump supporter, but what they're doing to him is just wrong. I've heard that from people all across this country. And it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat, if they're willing to do that to a president of the United States, a former sitting president, imagine what they will do to you. And that's where I think the root of this is people are seeing that this government has gotten so over its skis and so obtuse in the sense that they will do what's best for them, but not what's best for the people, not recognizing that they work for the people, that it scares them. And everyday American people, folks that are very politically involved and folks that aren't politically involved, they're all waking up and saying, this is scary stuff. This can't stand. And they're getting involved, and they will be supporting President Trump.
I imagine that in the very near future, either Trump will continue to really, kind of slap Nikki Haley around metaphorically, like just kind of keep going after her in this race, or he'll just begin to ignore her entirely and act as if she's not really around. What do you think is going to happen?
The thing that I know about President Trump is that he is very mission focused, very mission oriented. And for him, you've seen where he brings his former political foes, his opponents into the fold. And so much in the way that you saw Vivek and you saw Tim Scott on stage with him in New Hampshire, I think there could be a potential to see, maybe a Nikki Haley, maybe a Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis came out and endorsed President Trump. I don't think it's so far out of the realm of possibility that you could see Nikki Haley being somehow involved in campaigning to defeat Joe Biden. I know people right now would say, oh, my gosh, I can't believe that. But think about this. He's not really a vengeful guy. I know everyone, the left will want to say that that's all he's about, but that's not true. He is very smart, very, very strategic. Yeah. And he recognizes that you're going to need people from all different corners of the Republican Party in order to defeat Joe Biden. And so I think that there could be a lot of show, as one of the elements in the campaign. But I do think, we get into the summertime, you'll see a lot more unity and people focus on defeating Joe Biden.
Totally. I mean, I definitely agree that things can change very rapidly. I often reflect on, Trump referring to Ted Cruz's wife as ugly or saying that his dad was involved in killing JFK. And then eventually the two of them seem to be best of friends. So things have changed quite a bit for them. But I will say with Nikki Haley, at least for now, I think things are becoming more and more raw among the base. I think their view is that she's a saboteur. Unlike, say, a Ron DeSantis, where they can say, well, the guy was in it, he thought he could win, he didn't. And certainly Vivek Ramaswamy, a guy who ran against Trump for a time, gets out after Iowa and says, look, I tried my best, that's it, I'm endorsing Trump. Water under the bridge. I'd be a little surprised, but maybe I'm wrong, if Nikki Haley gets the Vivek treatment very quickly.
I think that there's a lot more that's happening behind the scenes that, than we all know that's happening, in public. And that's always pretty typical of, presidential level politics. The camps are always talking in some capacity.
Right.
So I think, given how there has really been a divide between the Haley camp and the Trump camp and even the DeSantis camp, I think that delta will take a lot more mending than, say, a Vivek coming into the fold as quickly as he has.
Yeah.
But I really do think that, we will see a 180 probably midsummer. And that's just my guess. I don't have any insider information that suggests that, just what history has shown us. And in the last, better part of a decade, we've seen where, President Trump, like I said, he's not focused on revenge. He's focused on building the best team possible, and he's focused on really making sure that the country is coming first. So if that means bringing, former enemies into the fold, then I'm sure that's probably the strategy.
And the core of the conversation you and I are having is about his electoral strength in a general election. What is it going to take to get him over the finish line, get him back into the White House? How do you assess that right now? It does seem that the demographics for a Trump candidacy have changed to his benefit. I think a more diverse group of Americans of all stripes is now inclined to support him. We've seen him bring over all sorts of people to the Republican Party who were never Republican voters throughout their lives. That's true. Mm-hmm. How do things look in November? I think there are quite a few, maybe even here in D.C. in particular, Republicans who support Trump, but they are concerned about what the general election looks like. How do you assess it?
I think that there's, definite a right to be concerned about the general election, because we saw what happened in the last presidential election. We were winning when we all went to bed, and then you wake up and all of a sudden, boom, that's not the case. And so I think there's a lot of distrust right now that needs to be overcome, which is why I continue to encourage people, hey, get involved with your local supervisor of election. You need to be a poll watcher. You need to be in the canvassing board. Be involved. The election integrity process is eternal vigilance. It's not a one-shot thing. So that's the first part. And so overcoming that hesitancy that people have really expressed loudly, and rightfully so, that's one of the elements. The second part of that is I serve as one of the co-chairs for the Youth Advisory Council nationally. And in talking with young people, there's a pretty big delta in loyalty to a party versus a loyalty to a particular issue. And in New Hampshire, we held a roundtable with a bunch of college-age students, and they were, by and large, they all really kind of supported the Democrat ticket, not for any other reason, was that they thought that those people on the Democrat side better represented their policy positions. And as I talked to them, they said, I never realized that Republicans were on this issue in this way. And so I feel like when it comes to addressing the millennials and the Gen Zs, which will make up about more than half at this point of the entire electorate, we have to start communicating about the issues rather than party-based issues. And for women especially, we need to be very cognizant that around the country, there's going to be abortion on demand on the ballot. And that is going to drive voter turnout out of demographics that typically haven't shown up. So it's much more than just hey, this is about Donald Trump. It's about, hey, there are statewide ballot initiatives that are going to greatly impact voter turnout, like legalizing marijuana, recreational marijuana, abortion on demand. There are major gambling issues, you name it. There's going to be things that people don't see coming that are going to impact the election. That's why we have to work really hard now, unite, and make sure that we have our base locked up, and then start identifying those persuadables, right? The savables that you can talk to and really get them to understand that Republican positions and values and our policies are better for them and their families and their future.
Yeah, and by the way, what you just mentioned is an underappreciated feature of electoral politics, ballot referendums as a way to induce turnout. Weed for everybody, and then all of a sudden you get an atypical group of voters start rolling out of bed and showing up at the polls. Hey, thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Kat Cammack. Nice to talk to you today.